The file on Elena Voss lay open on the mahogany desk like a wound that refused to close. Alexander Kane stood motionless at the tall window of his study, the morning sun painting long golden streaks across the Persian rug. His jaw was locked so tight it ached. Every police report, every hospital note, every grainy photograph felt like a knife twisting deeper into his chest. Elena Voss, 29 years old, 7 months pregnant. Hired as overnight housekeeping in his own mansion under a false sense of safety. The woman who once meant everything to him was now scrubbing his floors while carrying another man's child and wearing another man's bruises. He had seen those marks before. Not just on her. On his own mother's wrists when he was a boy on Willow Street, before his father's car accident, taught young Alex that the only way to survive was to become more dangerous than the monsters around you. History was repeating itself in the worst possible way, inside his own home. Alexander turned back to the desk and picked up the driver's license photo from 4 years ago. Even then she had the same quiet strength in her eyes, but the smile was smaller, guarded. Nothing like the bright, fearless grin of the girl who used to chase kites with him until the streetlights came on. He pressed the intercom. "Bring Elena Voss to my private study. Tell her it's about her employment status. Do it gently." 23 minutes later, a soft knock echoed through the heavy oak door. Alexander straightened his tie, forcing his expression into the calm mask he wore in boardrooms before delivering fatal blows. "Come in." The door opened. Elena stepped inside, still wearing her dark green uniform, the fabric stretched tight over her rounded belly. Her left wrist was now covered by a long sleeve, but he could still picture every fingerprint. She kept her eyes lowered, hands clasped protectively in front of her. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Kane?" Her voice was soft, careful, the same tone she had used in the library hours earlier. Alexander studied her for a long moment. The scar above her left eyebrow caught the light, his scar. The one he had caused by losing his kite that day. She still didn't recognize him. The boy she knew had been scrawny, poor, and full of hope. The man standing before her was tall, wealthy beyond measure, and carried darkness in his eyes. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. He kept his voice gentle, the way he remembered speaking to her when they were children hiding from the world on rooftops. She hesitated, then lowered herself carefully into the chair, one hand resting on her belly. The protective gesture sent another wave of fury through him. "I reviewed your file this morning," he began, choosing his words with precision. "You've been with us for 7 months. Your supervisor says you're reliable, quiet, never complain." Elena nodded once. "I try to do my job well, sir." He leaned forward slightly. "The overnight shift is difficult for anyone, especially someone in your condition. Why did you request it?" Her fingers tightened on the fabric of her uniform. "It pays better. And I prefer working when most people are asleep. Safer." The word slipped out sharper than intended. "I should go," she said suddenly, pulling her hand back. "This is too much. I can't drag you into my mess. Marcus, he's dangerous. He doesn't stop." Alexander's voice turned to steel. "Neither do I." He walked to the window again, giving her space while the weight of 2 decades pressed down on both of them. "I searched for you for years after your family disappeared," he said, staring out at the perfectly manicured gardens. "Private investigators. Missing persons. Nothing. I thought you didn't want to be found. I was wrong." Elena remained seated, both hands now cradling her belly. "My father owed dangerous people money. We left in the middle of the night. No goodbyes. I wanted to write you, but we moved so many times. Shelters. New cities. I thought you'd forgotten about me." "I never forgot." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Outside, the grounds were peaceful. Inside this room, 2 childhood hearts were cracking open after 20 years apart. Finally, Elena spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant with another man's child. I'm still legally married. Marcus will never let me go. I came here because I thought no one would find me. I was wrong too. Alexander turned to face her fully. The ruthless billionaire, the man who had destroyed competitors without mercy, felt something ancient and fierce rise in his chest. You're safe here now, Elena. You and your baby. I'm assigning security to the East Wing. 24 hours a day. He won't get near you. She looked at him with a mixture of hope and deep, bone-weary fear. Why would you do all this for me? After all these years. He met her eyes, the same brown eyes with flecks of gold he remembered from their childhood. Because you were the only good thing in my life on Willow Street. And I'm not the boy who let you disappear anymore. I'm the man who can make sure it never happens again. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly, another tear escaping. For the first time in months, the tension in her shoulders eased, just slightly. But as Alexander watched her, a new tension coiled in his own chest. Because he knew men like Marcus Hale. They didn't simply disappear. They came back. Harder. Meaner. More determined. And this time, the target was living under Alexander Kane's roof. The East Wing suite felt more like a luxury hotel than staff quarters. Elena Voss stood in the center of the large bedroom, one hand resting on her belly, staring at the king-sized bed with fresh white linens, the crystal chandelier, and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the private rose garden. A basket of baby items sat on the dresser, soft onesies, tiny blankets, and a stuffed rabbit with floppy ears. Flowers, fresh white lilies, filled a vase on the nightstand. Their sweet scent filled the air. "This is too much," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. Alexander Kane leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her carefully. "It's just a room, Elena. You need a safe place to rest. That's all this is." She turned to him, eyes shining. The scar above her eyebrow caught the afternoon light. "Alex. Mr. Kane. I've been sleeping in a tiny staff room with a single bed for 7 months. This feels like a dream. But dreams don't last when Marcus is involved." He stepped inside and closed the door softly behind him. "Call me Alexander. Or Alex, if you want. And Marcus won't touch you here. I've doubled security on the entire East Wing. Motion sensors, cameras, guards with special forces backgrounds. He tries anything, he won't make it past the gate." Elena walked slowly to the window, her pregnant belly making her movements deliberate and heavy. She placed both hands on the glass. "You don't know him like I do. He's patient. He waits. Then he strikes when you think you're safe." Alexander joined her at the window. They stood side by side, looking out at the perfectly manicured grounds. The contrast was jarring, luxury and safety surrounding a woman who had known nothing but fear and survival for years. "Tell me about him," he said quietly. "Everything." She was silent for a long moment. Then the words began to spill out, slow and painful, like pulling glass from an old wound. "We met when I was 22. I was waitressing, barely making rent. He seemed charming at first. Strong. Protective. After everything with my father's debts and running, it felt safe. We got married quickly. Then the mask came off. The first time he grabbed my wrist hard enough to bruise, he apologized with flowers. The second time, he told me I made him do it. By the time the fractured rib happened, I was already too scared to leave." Alexander's hands tightened into fists at his sides. He kept his voice steady, but inside, something dark and ruthless stirred, the same part of him that had built an empire by crushing anyone who stood in his way. "I filed for a restraining order once," Elena continued. "He showed up at the courthouse smiling. Just like in the police photos. Told the judge I was unstable because of the pregnancy. I dropped it 2 weeks later when he threatened my mother. Then I ran. Changed my name on some paperwork, took overnight jobs where I could stay invisible. I thought your mansion was the perfect hiding place. A billionaire's house. Who would look for me here?" She laughed bitterly, a short, broken sound. Turns out the billionaire was you. Alexander reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. His fingers brushed her shoulder. You're not invisible anymore. And you're not alone. For the first time since she had arrived, Elena leaned into the touch, just slightly. The warmth of his hand seemed to steady her. But the moment was fragile. That night, at 2:07 a.m., Alexander waited in the library again, the same room where he had first seen her on her knees. He had dismissed the night staff. The fire crackled low in the marble fireplace, casting long shadows across the Persian rugs. Elena entered carrying her cleaning caddy out of habit, even though he had reassigned her. She stopped when she saw him sitting in the leather armchair. You don't have to clean anymore, he said. I know. Old habits. She set the caddy down but didn't sit. I can't sleep. Every sound makes me think it's him. Come sit by the fire. She did. They talked for hours. About Willow Street. The kite. The fence. The letters he wrote for 2 years that never reached her. Her life in shelters. The fear that never left her. The baby, a sperm donor decision she made while running, wanting to create something pure and untouched by Marcus. I thought about you when I decided, she admitted softly, staring into the flames. What kind of man I wanted my child to know. Someone steady. Someone who showed up. Someone who fought for the people he loved. I remembered the boy who gave me his last piece of gum after I scraped my knee. Alexander felt his chest tighten. I'm not that boy anymore, Elena. She looked at him, really looked. No. You're harder. More dangerous. But the part that protected me, that part is still there. The silence between them grew warm, charged. Their eyes held. For a moment, the years melted away. Then his phone vibrated on the side table. A security alert. He glanced at the screen. His expression darkened. What is it? Elena asked, fear creeping back into her voice. Nothing you need to worry about tonight. But he stood up, tension radiating from his shoulders. Get some rest. I'll check on you in the morning. Outside the main gate, hidden in the shadows just beyond the property line, a man in a black leather jacket stood smoking. Marcus Hale. He stared up at the lit windows of the east wing, a cold smile playing on his lips. He had been watching for 3 hours. He knew exactly where she was now. The next morning, Elena ventured into the kitchen for the first time. She moved around the massive chef's space with quiet wonder, her hand occasionally brushing her belly. Alexander sat at the island, pretending to read emails while watching her. You used to love cooking, he said. I did. Before Marcus decided it was a waste of time unless it was for him. She opened the refrigerator, pulled out ingredients, and began chopping vegetables with surprising skill. Pasta okay? Perfect. As she cooked, something shifted. She laughed when she bumped her belly against the counter. A real laugh, the first he had heard in 20 years. The sound loosened something tight in Alexander's chest. He told her stories from their childhood. She reminded him of the time they stole apples from old Mr. Kowalski's tree and ran until they collapsed in an alley, laughing until they cried. For a few precious hours, the mansion felt warm. Safe. But safety was an illusion. On the 5th night, the security system lit up Alexander's phone again. Movement at the east gate. He reviewed the footage in his study. Marcus Hale stood there, hands in his pockets, staring directly at the camera. Smiling. He held up a single photograph, Elena, taken from a distance while she was in the garden earlier that day. He knew she was here. And he wanted Alexander to know that he knew. Alexander's blood ran cold. He immediately increased patrols and called his head of security. He gets within 50 feet of the fence, you call me first. Then the police. Understood. The tension began to build like a storm on the horizon. Elena noticed the change in Alexander. The extra guards. The way he checked on her more frequently. The way his jaw tightened every time his phone buzzed. "You're hiding something from me," she said one evening as they sat in the library again. The fire crackled. Rain tapped against the tall windows. He didn't deny it. "Marcus has been at the gate. Multiple times." She went pale. Her hand flew to her belly. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her fear. "He'll never stop. He told me once that if I ever left him, he'd make sure no one else could have me." Alexander moved closer. He took her hand, his thumb gently tracing the fading bruises on her wrist. "He doesn't know who he's dealing with now. I've destroyed men far more powerful than him. I built this empire so I would never be weak again. So I could protect what matters." Their faces were close now. The air between them thickened with years of longing, unspoken feelings, and the sharp edge of danger. Elena's voice trembled. "I'm scared, Alex. Not just for me. For her." She looked down at her belly. "I think it's a girl." "Then we'll keep her safe," he said, voice low and fierce. "Both of you." He leaned in. Their foreheads almost touched. The pull was magnetic, childhood love rekindling into something deeper, more adult, more desperate. But before their lips could meet, another security alert cut through the moment like a blade. This time, Marcus wasn't alone. 2 other men stood with him beyond the gate, watching. Waiting. Alexander pulled back, eyes hardening into the ruthless mask the business world feared. "He's escalating," he said quietly. Elena grabbed his arm. "Don't do anything dangerous. Please. I've already lost too much." But as Alexander stared at the live feed, he felt the old darkness rising, the part of him that had made enemies disappear when necessary. For Elena. For the child she carried. He would become whatever he needed to be. The storm was no longer on the horizon. It was here. The library fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows across the walls lined with ancient books. Alexander Kane stood at the window, phone gripped tightly in his hand, watching the live security feed. Marcus Hale and his 2 companions remained just beyond the property line, their silhouettes barely visible under the security lights. They weren't advancing. Not yet. But their presence felt like a blade pressed against the throat of the night. Elena rose slowly from the leather sofa, one hand supporting her heavy belly. "Alex," she said, her voice trembling with exhaustion and fear. "Let me see." He hesitated, then turned the screen toward her. The moment her eyes landed on Marcus's face, she sucked in a sharp breath. Even from a distance, that cold smile was unmistakable. The same smile he wore when he promised her she would never escape. "He's getting bolder," Alexander said, his tone flat, dangerous. "He brought friends this time." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, or as much as her pregnant belly would allow. "This is what he does. He circles. He lets you feel safe, then he tightens the noose. I can't stay here. I won't put you in danger." Alexander crossed the room in 3 strides and gently took her shoulders. "You're not going anywhere. Look at me, Elena." She lifted her eyes. The gold flecks in her brown irises caught the firelight, just as they had when they were children. But now those eyes carried the weight of 1,000 nightmares. "I let you disappear once," he continued, voice low and intense. "I woke up one morning and your apartment was empty. No note. No goodbye. I spent years wondering what I did wrong. I won't survive losing you a second time." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away this time. "You were the only good thing I ever had, Alex. On Willow Street, you made me feel safe when the whole world felt like it was collapsing. But this," she gestured toward the window, "this is different. Marcus isn't some neighborhood bully. He's broken people before. He'll break you too if he thinks it'll hurt me." Alexander's jaw tightened. For the first time, he let her see the darkness he usually kept buried beneath expensive suits and boardroom smiles. "I'm not the boy who flew kites anymore," he said. "I've done things, Elena. Things that would keep most men awake at night. I built this empire with more than just intelligence and hard work. I made sure no one could ever hurt me or mine again. And right now, you and that baby are mine to protect." The words hung heavy between them. Elena searched his face, seeing the ruthless man he had become, and the boy she remembered beneath it. "You scare me sometimes," she whispered. "Not like Marcus scares me, but because I see what you're willing to become, for me." He pulled her closer, careful of her belly. She rested her forehead against his chest. For several long moments, they simply stood there, breathing together. The scent of her hair, lemon polish mixed with something soft and floral, filled his lungs. The years apart dissolved into something raw and electric. "I never stopped thinking about you," she confessed against his shirt. "Even when I was married, even when things were at their worst. I would close my eyes and remember the way you held my hand walking to school. The way you stood up to those older boys. You were my hero then. And I'll be your hero now," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Whatever it takes." Their faces drew closer. The pull was undeniable. Years of lost time, buried feelings, and desperate need collided in the quiet library. Alexander tilted her chin gently with his fingers, his thumb brushing the faded scar above her eyebrow, the scar he had been there for. Their lips were inches apart when Elena suddenly tensed. The baby kicked hard between them. She laughed softly through her tears, the sound breaking some of the unbearable tension. "She's reminding us she's here too." "She?" Alexander asked, a rare smile touching his lips. "I feel like it's a girl. I want to name her Grace. A second chance." "Grace," he repeated, the name settling warmly in his chest. "I like it." But the tender moment shattered with the sharp vibration of his phone. Another alert. This time it wasn't the gate. Marcus had somehow gotten a message through, a single text sent to Elena's old phone number, which she had kept active out of fear of missing something important from her mother. Alexander read it aloud, his voice cold. "I know where you are, sweetheart. Nice big house. Billionaire boyfriend. Cute. But you belong to me. Come out, or I come in. You have until tomorrow night." Elena's knees buckled. Alexander caught her, guiding her back to the sofa. She was shaking violently now. "He's never going to stop," she sobbed. "Even if you lock me in this mansion forever, he'll find a way. He always does." Alexander knelt in front of her, taking both her hands in his. The bruises on her left wrist had faded to pale yellow, but they were still visible, a permanent reminder of what she had endured. "Look at me," he commanded gently. "I have lawyers. The best in the country. We're filing for divorce immediately. We're getting a permanent restraining order. And if he steps 1 foot on this property, I will handle him personally." "Alex, you can't." "I can. And I will." The turning point crystallized in that moment. Elena stared into his eyes and saw the truth. This man would burn the world down for her. Not out of blind rage, but out of a love that had survived 20 years of separation and pain. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the hard line of his jaw. "I'm falling for you again," she whispered. "I never really stopped. But I'm terrified that loving me is going to destroy you." Alexander turned his head and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Loving you is the only thing that's ever made sense in my life." He helped her to her feet and walked her back to her suite in the East Wing. At the door he lingered, reluctant to leave her alone even with armed guards outside. "Try to sleep," he said. "I'll be right down the hall if you need me." Elena nodded, but as she closed the door, the fear in her eyes lingered. Alexander didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study reviewing every piece of information his team had gathered on Marcus Hale. Criminal record, known associates, past victims who had disappeared or dropped charges. The deeper he dug, the darker it became. At 4:12 a.m., another security alert came through. This time, Marcus had left a gift at the main gate. A small stuffed bear, identical to one Elena had mentioned keeping from her childhood. Around its neck was a note written in black marker. For my daughter. Daddy's coming home soon. Alexander crushed the note in his fist, his knuckles turning white. The game had changed. Marcus wasn't just stalking anymore. He was declaring war. And Alexander Kane had never lost a war. But as he stared at the stuffed bear, a new fear crept in, not for himself, but for the woman and unborn child sleeping under his protection. The stakes had just become higher than anything he had ever faced in business. Because this wasn't about money or power anymore. This was about the only two people in the world who could truly break him. The stuffed bear sat on Alexander Kane's desk like a bomb that had already detonated. Its glassy eyes stared blankly upward while the handwritten note lay crumpled beside it. For my daughter. Daddy's coming home soon. The words burned behind Alexander's eyes as he stood in the dim glow of his study lamp at 5:30 a.m. He hadn't slept. Every security camera feed played on the monitors, looping the moment Marcus Hale placed the bear at the gate with that same cold, knowing smile. The man wasn't just taunting anymore. He was marking territory. A soft knock pulled Alexander from his thoughts. Elena stood in the doorway in a simple cream robe that draped over her pregnant belly. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying. I heard the guards talking, she said quietly. He left something, didn't he? Alexander didn't lie to her. He picked up the bear and handed it over. Elena took it with trembling hands. The moment she saw the note, her entire body shuddered. He used to call her that, she whispered. Even before she was conceived. He said any child of mine would belong to him forever. She clutched the bear to her chest, then dropped it as if it burned her. I can't do this anymore, Alex. I should leave before someone gets hurt. No, his voice was steel wrapped in velvet. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. Careful, always careful with her and the baby. You're not running. Not this time. He led her to the sofa near the fireplace and sat beside her. The early morning light filtered through the tall windows, painting soft gold across her face and highlighting the faint scar above her eyebrow. Tell me everything, he said. No more hiding pieces. I need to know what we're really facing. Elena stared into the cold fireplace for a long moment. Then the dam broke. She told him about the years after she left Willow Street. The shelters. The nights her father drank himself unconscious out of fear. Her mother's quiet crying. How she dropped out of school to work 3 jobs. How she met Marcus when she was desperate for any kind of stability. How love turned into control, then violence. I stayed longer than I should have, she admitted, voice cracking. Because I kept thinking if I was just better, quieter, more obedient, he would stop. But he never did. The fractured rib was the worst. I told the doctors I fell. They didn't believe me, but I checked myself out before the police came. I was too scared. Alexander listened without interrupting, but his hands clenched until his knuckles went white. Every bruise she described felt like one on his own skin. I left him when I found out I was pregnant, she continued. I knew I couldn't bring a child into that house. I went to a clinic. A sperm donor. I wanted this baby to have a clean start. No DNA from a monster. She looked up at him then, eyes bright with unshed tears. I chose the donor profile based on traits that reminded me of you. Tall. Intelligent. Kind eyes in the photo. I told myself it was crazy, that you were probably married with kids somewhere, living a completely different life. But when I lay in that clinic, I thought about the boy who flew kites. The boy who shared his last piece of gum. The boy who stood between me and danger without hesitation. I wanted my daughter to know a man like that existed. Alexander felt something crack open inside his chest. He reached out and gently placed his hand on her belly. The baby kicked strongly against his palm, as if answering him. She's not mine by blood, Elena whispered. But in my heart. I wanted her to be yours. I wanted her to have the father I always wished I could give her. The words landed like a quiet explosion. Alexander pulled her closer, pressing his forehead to hers. Their breathing mingled. She is mine, he said fiercely. Blood doesn't matter. I claimed her the moment I saw you on your knees in my library. Grace Kane. That's who she'll be. If you'll let me. Elena's tears finally fell. She kissed him then, soft at first, hesitant, two broken souls afraid the moment might vanish. Then deeper, filled with 20 years of longing, fear, and rediscovered love. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I love you, Elena Voss, he said against her lips. I loved the girl on Willow Street. I love the woman carrying Grace. And I will love whoever you become after this is over. I love you too, she whispered back. I never stopped. Even when I tried. For the first time in years, the mansion felt warm. Alive. Hopeful. But the universe rarely allows peace to last. At 11:47 p.m. that same night, Elena's phone rang. She had kept the old number only for emergencies. The caller ID was unknown, but she knew. She let it go to voicemail. Alexander played the message on speaker in his study, his arm around her shoulders. Marcus's voice filled the room, calm and almost friendly, the way a predator sounds right before it strikes. Hey sweetheart. Nice mansion. I saw you in the garden today looking all domestic with your new rich boyfriend. Cute. Real cute. But we both know you don't belong there. You belong with me. Come home willingly and I'll be nice. Make me come get you, and things get ugly. For both of you. Clock's ticking. The line went dead. Elena buried her face in Alexander's chest. He held her tight, but his eyes stared at the phone with lethal calm. The next morning, his legal team arrived. Margaret Chen, one of the sharpest family law attorneys in the country, spent 4 hours with Elena going through every detail of the marriage, every hospital visit, every threat. When she finished, she closed her notebook with quiet respect. You have a strong case, she told Elena. The dropped restraining order is tricky, but the pattern of abuse is clear. We'll file for divorce immediately and request an emergency permanent protection order. The baby complicates paternity, but since you used a donor, we can fight that. As Margaret left, she pulled Alexander aside. I know you, Kane. Don't do anything stupid. Let the law handle him. If he ends up in the hospital, it weakens her case. Alexander said nothing. His face remained expressionless. That afternoon, he took Elena to the garden. They walked slowly among the roses, her arm linked with his. The sun was warm on their skin. For a little while, the threats felt distant. I used to dream about this, Elena said softly. A safe place. Someone who looked at me like I mattered. A future for my daughter. You have it now, he replied, stopping to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered on the scar above her eyebrow. The kite. The fence. The blood. That day changed everything for me. I promised myself I would never let anyone hurt you again. I failed once. I won't fail twice. She smiled, a real, tired, hopeful smile. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Before he could answer, his phone vibrated. A new security alert. This time the photo attached to the alert showed Marcus standing inside the outer perimeter fence. He had breached the first layer of security. In his hand was another photo, one taken of Elena that very morning in this same garden. He was getting closer. Alexander's expression hardened into the face that had destroyed entire companies. The ruthless protector had fully awakened. He's inside the fence line, he told Elena, voice low. But he won't get near this house. I swear it. Elena's hand tightened on his arm. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing the rising storm. The major reveals had changed everything. Their love was no longer just rekindling, it was burning bright. But Marcus Hale had crossed the final line. War was no longer coming. It had arrived at their doorstep. The storm hit at 2:48 a.m. Rain hammered the tall windows of the east wing like gunfire. Thunder rolled across the estate, shaking the crystal chandeliers. Alexander Kane was in his study when the scream tore through the monitors. Elena! He was running before his brain fully registered the sound, feet pounding down the long hallway. Guards scrambled behind him, but he reached her suite first. He burst through the door. Elena was on the floor beside the bed, her nightgown soaked, face twisted in agony. A pool of water spread across the hardwood. Her hands clutched her belly. "The baby," she gasped, voice raw. "She's coming. Now." Alexander dropped to his knees beside her, heart slamming against his ribs. "It's too early. The due date." "Storm," she cried out as another contraction hit. "Ambulance. Roads are flooded. They said, they can't get through for at least an hour." Lightning flashed, illuminating the terror in her eyes. The same eyes that once told a scared boy not to cry while blood ran down her own face. Alexander didn't hesitate. He scooped her up carefully and laid her on the bed, propping pillows behind her. His hands were steady even as fear clawed at his throat. He had faced hostile takeovers, armed threats, and men who wanted him dead. None of it compared to this. "I'm here," he said, voice low and commanding. "I've got you. Both of you." He called 911 on speakerphone. The operator's calm instructions filled the room while the storm raged outside. Elena gripped his hand so tightly her nails dug into his skin. Between contractions, she looked at him with desperate trust. "I'm scared, Alex." "You're the strongest person I've ever known," he told her, wiping sweat from her forehead. "You survived Marcus. You survived running. You survived everything. This is nothing compared to you." Another contraction ripped through her. She screamed, body arching. Alexander held her through it, murmuring words he barely remembered from their childhood. Promises, silly jokes from Willow Street, anything to keep her anchored. Time blurred. The power flickered once, twice. The generator kicked in, bathing the room in warm emergency light. Elena's breathing grew ragged. Her dark hair clung to her face, the scar above her eyebrow stark against her pale skin. "I can't do this," she sobbed during a brief lull. "Yes, you can." He pressed his forehead to hers, their faces inches apart. "Remember the kite. You fell off that fence and still smiled. You told me it was just a scratch. Be that girl right now. Be strong for Grace." Elena nodded, tears streaming. "For Grace. And for you." The next contraction came harder. The 911 operator guided him step by step. Alexander followed every instruction with laser focus, the ruthless billionaire reduced to a man delivering the child he already claimed as his own. "I see the head," he said, voice cracking with awe and fear. Elena pushed with everything she had left. Her screams mixed with thunder. Alexander's hands, usually used for signing million-dollar deals, gently guided new life into the world. Then came the moment. A tiny, slippery body slid into his waiting hands. The baby cried, a strong, furious wail that cut through the storm. "It's a girl," Alexander whispered, tears he didn't know he could still cry streaming down his face. "She's here, Elena. Grace is here." He wrapped the newborn in clean towels and placed her on Elena's chest. The baby's tiny fists waved as she rooted instinctively. Elena's exhausted face transformed with pure, radiant love as she looked down at her daughter. "She's perfect," Elena breathed, voice breaking. "Look at her, Alex." Grace had a shock of dark hair and, when she briefly opened her eyes, brown irises with the faintest hint of gold. Alexander's heart shattered and rebuilt in the same second. Blood didn't matter. This child was his. He climbed onto the bed beside them, one arm around Elena, the other gently cradling Grace. The storm still raged outside, but inside this room, something sacred had happened. "I love you," he said, kissing Elena's damp forehead. "Both of you. More than anything I've ever built. More than all the money, all the power. This This is what I've been searching for my whole life. Elena leaned into him. Grace nestled safely between them. We're a family now, she whispered. No matter what happens next. But the universe demanded one final test. His phone lit up on the nightstand. A security alert. Marcus Hale had used the chaos of the storm to breach the inner perimeter. He was inside the grounds, heading toward the east wing. Alexander's expression hardened into something primal and deadly. He looked at Elena and Grace, then at the door. The emotional peak had arrived. Love had been reborn in blood and thunder. Now the final battle for their future had begun. The ambulance finally broke through the flooded roads at 4:12 a.m. Paramedics rushed into the East Wing suite, taking over with practiced efficiency. Alexander refused to leave Elena's side as they loaded her and Grace onto stretchers. He rode in the ambulance holding Elena's hand the entire way, his thumb gently stroking the faded bruises on her wrist. At the hospital, Grace was checked and declared perfectly healthy despite the early arrival. Alexander stood in the hallway, blood still on his sleeves from the birth, watching through the window as nurses settled his new family. 3 hours later, the final storm broke. Derek Vance, no, Marcus Hale, walked into the hospital lobby with that same cold smile. Leather jacket zipped tight, 2 men trailing behind him. He moved with the confidence of a man who believed he still owned what he had come to take. Alexander met him in the middle of the lobby. Carter, Kane, whatever you call yourself, Marcus sneered. I'm here for my wife and my daughter. Alexander stepped closer, voice low and deadly. She stopped being your wife the day you put your hands on her. The divorce was finalized this morning. Grace is not your child. She never will be. Marcus's smile faltered for the first time. You think money fixes everything? She belongs to me. Behind Alexander, 2 hospital security guards and his own team moved into position. Margaret Chen had already forwarded every police report, hospital record, and security footage to the authorities. The restraining order was active. The arrest warrant was being processed. Alexander leaned in until only Marcus could hear him. I know what you did. Every bruise. Every broken bone. Every threat. I've seen those marks before, on my own mother. You're finished. The police are already on their way. If you ever come near Elena or Grace again, prison will be the least of your worries. I make problems disappear, Marcus. Permanently. For the first time, real fear flashed in Marcus's eyes. He looked at the man standing before him, no longer just a billionaire, but the protector who had delivered Grace with his own hands and would burn the world to keep them safe. The police arrived moments later. Marcus was arrested for violating the restraining order, stalking, and multiple counts of assault. His 2 companions scattered but were quickly detained. As they led him away in handcuffs, Marcus looked back once. Alexander met his gaze without blinking. It was over. Back in the recovery room, Elena sat up in bed, Grace sleeping peacefully against her chest. The morning light streamed through the blinds, soft and golden. Alexander walked in, and the tension finally drained from his shoulders. He sat on the edge of the bed and wrapped his arms around both of them. It's done, he whispered. He's gone. For good this time. Elena's eyes filled with tears of relief. She touched the scar above her eyebrow, then reached up to touch Alexander's face. The boy who flew kites saved me again, she said softly. And the girl who told me not to cry gave me a family, he replied. He kissed her gently, then leaned down and pressed a kiss to Grace's tiny forehead. The baby stirred, her little hand wrapping around his finger with surprising strength. They had survived. They had found each other again. And in the middle of the storm, they had built something unbreakable. 3 days later, they returned to the mansion. Elena no longer wore a maid's uniform. She walked through the grand halls as the woman who owned Alexander Kane's heart. The East Wing suite became their family home. Flowers filled every room. The stuffed rabbit sat on the nursery dresser beside the bear that had once been a threat, now just a reminder of how far they had come. Alexander Kane, the ruthless billionaire, had finally found what all his money could never buy. Peace. Love. A second chance.